Hi there. You would think this coronavirus crisis will be distracting me from my meditations every day, but so far it hasn't. In fact, so far it actually has meant that I do more meditation rather than less. It has distracted me from composing music and other creative projects, um, but not from meditation. And you can draw from that what you will in terms of moral. Um, Maybe we need adversity in order to make us go within rather than go without. If things are sort of going without, as it were, we need to go more within. Or maybe it's just that, when the body is ill, the mind is still. And I mean, I'm ill at the moment, but with what I do not know. But it's making my mind stiller. And So anyway, I'll leave that as it may. Um, it does feel like it's the end of humanity, but of course that's impossible. The species won't die out, and that's ridiculous thinking. It could be the end of civilization as we know it in the West, and since we're so Western orientated, that's a big deal for the West to come to an ignominious end. It's more like, in fact, a war situation, I suppose, as a lot of people have commented already. And a war situation goes on until peace breaks out, or in this case, until they find a vaccine. Um, but so that's one thing. So, but it does feel like obviously a crisis situation at the very least. Now, against that, obviously, we have to consider Project Fear. Project Fear basically is a conspiracy theory that very loosely says that when governments are in retreat, when systems of economic commerce are in retreat, when the military-industrial complex is in crisis, they have to generate fear from time to time in order to justify their continuing existence. Because in fact, the natural course of events is not towards communism, but in fact is to decentralized anarcho-communism, which is completely the opposite of both Stalinism and present military-industrial capitalism. So there's a lot of conspiracy theories over that. Obviously, I dare to go to Alex Jones's channel. I dare go to David Icke. I dare go to any of these other conspiracy theorists because they just generate more fear and more discomfort in the soul. Perhaps that's what they're there for as well. Perhaps they're part of this Project Fear. I don't know. And people have also said, this is a conspiracy to keep us all separate from one another, to stop us touching each other, to stop us collecting together as social units, and stop us having festivals and fun and generally keeping us all separate in little boxes and on the internet and so forth. There's lots of conspiracy theories like that around. And the thing about a conspiracy theory is it's a bit like telling a story. And the story has a logic of its own, right? The narrative has a logic of its own, but it doesn't mean to say that any of the things are actually true. So you can write a story about time travel, for example, and it can be completely logical. If you can, you're a better man than me, Gunga Din, and you can do all that. But it's still a story, no matter how logical it may seem. So no matter how logical conspiracy theories may seem, without evidence, without an email saying, "Hey, we're going to take over the world, and this is how we're going to do it," you don't really have any, you don't have any purpose to your narrative other than spreading fear and panic. However, it's interesting that Donald Trump is concerned that, just as on the microscopic level, your body generates a fever when it's attacked by viruses, so society can sort of go into fever land when attacked by the thought of coronavirus, never mind its actual manifestation. What that really means is that the reaction to the virus, both on a personal scale and on a collective scale, can often, well, does actually do more damage than the actual virus itself. But and the other thing, of course, is that people are saying it's actually worse than it is. First of all, they told us not to shake hands, and then it was like a meter apart, and now it's 2 meters apart, and in Germany it's 1.5 meters apart because that's what the Germans do. Obviously, they're very precise people, and that's what you expect. A lot of people are getting it, and in Madrid, in Spain, for example, there's total lockdown. Especially the children mustn't go out. So there's concern over children and young people, despite the fact that we were told it was only old people and vulnerable people that would be at risk. But is that the case? And is the case the fact that the coronavirus is actually far more virulent than they actually thought? And the other thing to note, of course, as well, which isn't a conspiracy theory, it's just a fact of science, is that you make decisions on the basis of the data that you have to hand. But if that data is changing all the time, then virtually what you're doing is making decisions which are pretty inadequate in the face of an unfolding crisis. Particularly as you're sort of flying blind, you don't actually know what's going on really. You just have a pretty good idea what's going on, but you don't really know the whole picture. And it's not until the whole picture actually emerges that you find that you've probably been making all the wrong decisions. And I mean, that's true of all of our lives, isn't it, really? We make decisions based on what we know, and we don't know enough, so we're not going to make the right decisions ever. And this is all part of the course, really, in the lower worlds. This is the realms of the demiurge for you. This is how it is. We don't have clear sight. We have emerging information, and we have to make decisions because we can't make no decisions. Although the Tao Te actually does say, do nothing is the best policy in the face of the lower worlds, because if you do nothing, then you can actually see what is transpiring, and then eventually, you will make the right decision. So, throughout Taoism, there's an emphasis on not doing, but waiting to see what you actually do have to do, and then striking like a tiger at the problem, which is what it says in the I Ching, primarily, which is based on Taoism, of course. So, I mean, it's obviously people are being opportunist and making a lot of money out of the situation. There's people that are going to make a lot of money out of the situation who are buying stocks and shares at rock bottom prices, and then they're going to make an absolute killing later on when the crisis is over. Some people do say, however, that if it's the end of civilization as we know it, the emphasis is on as we know it, and civilization in the West, or society in the West, will actually change. I mean, I was there in 1984 with the peace convoy, and what they were saying is that we should prepare for post-apocalyptic existence, and we should actually change because the planet is so sick of the way that we're exploiting it, that it's going to fight back, basically. And a lot of people, obviously, I think of The Green Brain, a short story by Frank Herbert, which is basically, the environment actually fighting back and getting rid of this virus called humanity. So there's lots of sort of scenarios, lots of theories going around, and conspiracy theories, and people saying this and that. It reminds me a bit of the Bible, when it says, that people will tell you that they've seen Jesus here and there, and war and rumours of war. But when Jesus returns, you'll be in absolute no doubt about that. And people won't have to have a theory about it or a conspiracy theory about it. It will be there in front of your face. It'll be there in front of the face of the entire humanity. So that's an interesting metaphorical story as well. Even if you don't believe it literally, you can still say that when things really are in crisis, you'll be in no doubt. So the best thing is to ignore all the stories that are going around, and just to wait and see what actually transpires. But there are a few disturbing stories, such as in Madrid, for example, there are people who have been literally imprisoned in their homes for 19 days, and many of the apartments in Madrid have no windows. So you're actually literally sitting in four walls. Like worse than prisoners have. And I mean, if there's food shortages as well in Madrid, I can predict, or I can foresee, that there'll be a strong desire of people collectively to break out of that city and disperse themselves in the countryside surrounding Madrid, in order to get away from their terrible imprisonment on one hand, and to get away from the chance of being infected on the other. And there's food shortages as well, are going to drive people out of their homes onto the streets and away from Madrid, and there's not much the authorities can do about it if it's done en masse. And if this is repeated over many cities, all over Spain, for example, and all over the world, then obviously civilization, even as we know it and don't know it, is going to be in trouble. So a lot of people being on the internet, and are dutifully ordering food online, which is a good idea. However, the servers are crashing because they weren't designed for millions of people to be ordering food online. So servers are crashing all over the place. People are getting sick, and they're not going into work. So of course that places a strain on personnel, on human resource management as well. But I'm just saying this. I mean, the idea remains the same. The objective of all this is to stop the spikes, stop the medical services from being overwhelmed. I mean, if you draw a graph, right, and you draw a graph of a number of cases over time, and time is this bit of the graph here that's the horizontal, and the number of cases is the vertical line. What you absolutely don't want, is you don't want a spike. You don't want the graph to go like that. You want to be able to cut that spike off there and have a sort of gentle kind of wave that goes up and sort of gradually goes down, and then goes back up for the winter. And you want the nice gentle waves and not spikes, okay, until a vaccine is found, in which case possibly the number of cases will go down. The number of hospitalizations will go down, but the actual coronavirus will become endemic, which will mean that it'll come back every winter. Just like the common, it'll be with us, sort of thing. And of course, Donald Trump just means that he's worried. You see that that actually letting the virus destroy the economy, or the threat of the virus to destroy the economy, is surely worse than just allowing it to gently become endemic. However, medical services tell us that it won't gently become endemic. Well, only if we act now. We want a gentle transition to an endemic virus rather than a catastrophic, spiky transition, which will mean that more people die, not only of the virus, but of other diseases as well, because the medical services won't be able to cope with other problems that people have, never mind the virus or the suspected virus. So you see, there's a lot of confusion, and this is all typical of life in the lower worlds. This is what the demiurge loves. He feeds on fear and greed, but mostly fear. And he also feeds on that statement. By the way, he feeds on the statement that he feeds on fear, because that puts more fear into people, then he gets more energy out of that. You see, so the best thing to do is to remain calm, to do your meditation, and not to take any notice of what the demiurge may or may not be doing, because he actually has done it for thousands and thousands and millions of years already. Not only on this planet, of course, but on every other planet that actually has sentient beings on it that are ruled by fear and greed. He gets his manna from all those planets as well. So there's no point in giving him more food. Really, he's pretty glutted out as it is. So then, as an individual and as individuals. Obviously, this video only goes out to 36 people, and there are 8-9 billion people in the world. But if people keep calm and do their meditation and not go into fear, then in fact those individuals stand a chance of not being pulled down into the mud. And having experienced spirituality at some level, it would be rather a shame for you to get dragged down into the mud of fear and actually lose the spiritual vision that you've already gained. You see, of course, I know that if you're in great pain due to the fact you can't breathe properly and you're on a ventilator and you're sedated, then obviously you're going to lose your spiritual vision big time. Or at least many parts of you are going to lose that vision. But of course, the soul is still there always. So as you go into the big black tunnel, you have to remember that your soul isn't going into that big black tunnel of fear and pain and anguish and anxiety. Your soul is not that anxiety. It's separate from it. And that thought alone might be of a certain comfort to you and have a certain calming influence on you as perhaps you do go into the black tunnel, or that you perceive the collective humanity from going into a black tunnel. But of course, you see, this is obviously, and the final point is that there will be social changes as a result of this crisis. As there were social changes after the Black Death in the Middle Ages, because peasants could then charge higher wages for getting for work, because there were so few of them to do the work, and that had huge ramifications and repercussions for society, and it meant that working class people had more power as a result of the Black Death. So it could be that, for example, it could be that in the workplace, people that go sick as a result of coronavirus or any other virus, will be treated fairer than they're treated at the moment, because at the moment people go into work even if they're sick, because they're afraid of losing their jobs because there are 0-hour contracts and because they can be laid off very quickly and replaced by a lot of other people that are waiting at the factory door to take your job. So that might change as a result of the coronavirus. So there's always positives as well as negatives from any crisis, which is also part of the demiurge and his, because he gives and takes. Okay, he can't have all take because that would sort of dry up his source. So he has to give as well. In fact, he has to give more than he takes. Just as a farmer actually has to give more to his cattle than eventually he will get back by selling their carcasses. So he will take the lives of his cattle eventually, but he actually has to look after them and give more to them to maintain the herd and keep it healthy than he has finally to destroy the life of individual calves and cows, right? So that's, he has to be a good farmer. But of course, ultimately, his livestock is for the slaughterhouse, obviously, because otherwise there wouldn't be any point in being in business. And, as he can't be sentimental about this, you've got a throughput of sentient beings, and ultimately they're going to be destroyed, of course, in one way or another, and made into various forms of nourishment, one way or another. But on the way, the farmer has to look after his herd, and so the demiurge is like the farmer. He has to harvest us, obviously, but he has to keep us, pretty safe and happy and healthy along the way to the slaughterhouse. Otherwise, he will lose more than he gains. And he sort of worked that out after thousands of years of trying, you see. So this has been Gnostic Vlog number 18, Confessio. There doesn't be much confession, really, apart from me saying it certainly feels to me like the end of the whole world. And I suppose, me and 1,000,000,000 other people, me and 9 billion other people feel that, obviously, from time to time. Especially people that are on the front line, the doctors and nurses who are caring for the people sick and dying. They feel it very keenly if they ever get a chance to feel anything, because they're working, literally like round the clock to keep people alive. So it is a crisis, it is a mess, and there's all sorts of reasons why that should be so. But the ultimate reason is that this is life, down here. This is life in the prison of the soul. But your soul is not part of the prison, even though a lot of your consciousness is part of it and is drawn into it and drawn into the drama, of the prison life. But you do have a part of you which you can access, and that part has nothing to do with this tragedy or comedy or whatever you want to call it, or farce or comedy of errors or whatever. It's got nothing to do with it. And if you can access that part of you which has nothing to do with all this, then your life will become a little bit better than it is now. And you can draw a little bit more comfort than perhaps you do through the internet and through watching pornography and games and playing games and doing all the things you're desperately trying to do in order to ward off fear and panic. Go within or go without. That has always been the maxim that defines basically our life in the realms of the demiurge.